This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Friday, April 24th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at our VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin with a massive fundraising effort to battle the global coronavirus pandemic. The G20 is calling on all countries, international organizations, the private sector, philanthropic institutions, and individuals to contribute to its goal of raising $8 billion to tackle COVID-19. The International Forum for the Governments and Central Bank Governors of 19 nations and the European Union said Friday it has already raised nearly $2 billion. There are at least 2.7 million cases of the virus worldwide and more than 190,000 deaths, according to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Research Center. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development is proposing to wipe out nearly $1 trillion of debt owed by developing countries to help them overcome the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. The organization says developing economies are confronting a record global downturn, plunging prices for their oil and commodity exports and weakening local currencies. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says his government will begin partial reopening of the economy on May 1st with eased travel restrictions. U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his strong support for the people of Kenya Thursday in a conversation with President Uhuru Kenyatta to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic. Trump offered the nation additional assistance in the fight to contain the coronavirus epidemic. The Muslim holy month of Ramadan begins Friday, with many countries in lockdown over the coronavirus, including Nigeria, which is home to West Africa's largest Muslim population. Communal prayer and breaking the daily fast with a large meal will be disrupted by social distancing measures. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
Nasir Umar, an automobile electrician, has not fixed a single car in 3 weeks because of the lockdown measures announced by Nigerian authorities in late March. He sent his wife and child back to his father's house in Maiduguri to reduce his financial burden. But without money to send them and Ramadan approaching, Umar says he may skip the traditional feast to break the daily fast this year.
Food is a basic for life and important during fasting. Without food, I cannot fast. In fact, if I had my way, and if not for the lockdown, I'd have also joined my family in Maiduguri.
Ramadan is observed by Muslims worldwide as a month of fasting and prayer. But practices like communal prayers and breaking the fast with a feast called Sahur will now be curtailed by the lockdown measures imposed to control the spread of the coronavirus.
If the government does not lift the ban on gatherings in mosques, we cannot come together during the fasting to pray. Everybody will observe their prayers privately at home.
Mosques throughout Nigeria have been shuttered, and worshippers with internet service have had to gather for prayer virtually. But Muslim scholars such as Sharafuddin Abdusalam say some things cannot be done online.
There's nothing like online Juma. You can't do that. You can't ask people to, form a role in their respective homes and follow you where you lead them in prayer. No, you can't do that. The Juma service has to be physical.
This Abuja mosque usually hosts 700 Muslims a day for large meals to break their fast during Ramadan, but it has been shut for nearly 1 month.
Islam is a simple way of life. If you cannot have what to eat during Sahur, and you know surely that if you try it, it will affect your health. Islam doesn't want anyone to fall down, sudden falling, or to slum or whatever. You are allowed to leave your fasting. That is Islam for you.
Nigeria has the largest population of Muslims in West Africa, but because of the coronavirus, many like Umar will be feeling a little lonely this Ramadan. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
The coronavirus outbreak threatens to upend Muslim traditions that have been practiced for almost 1,500 years. The pandemic has forced many governments to order unprecedented restrictions on movement, gathering, and collective prayers. VOA's Ayesha Tasnim brings us the story of the world's nearly 2 billion Muslims and how they will spend their holiest month, Ramadan.
Kaaba, the holiest of sites for Muslims, usually teeming with worshippers from around the world during Ramadan, is empty. Mosques in Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam, have closed their doors to the faithful. Even Masjid al-Nabawi, the mosque of Muhammad, the Muslim prophet, is closed. The government has ordered everyone to pray at home. Muslims around the world are grappling with a similarly grim reality. Their holiest month, usually marked with communal feasts and congregational prayers, will be spent trying to keep their fellow humans at a distance. Their mosques will remain empty, as seen during a special night of prayers pre-Ramadan.
Our mosque used to be overflowing at night. People worshipped all night long. This time I was the sole worshiper on my prayer mat. No one else was around.
Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, one of the most senior leaders of Shiite Islam, has told his followers to offer their prayers in solitude during the month of fasting. The closure of houses of worship is also expected to affect many of the less fortunate. During Ramadan, many mosques turn into soup kitchens for the poor as individuals or groups organize charity tables. Not this year, as Islam El-Sharbani told us via phone from Cairo.
In the mosque, we used to prepare iftar, the evening meal, for the people who couldn't afford it. We also prepared Ramadan food bags and financial aid to the poor people. With the current crisis, we will decrease somehow, but we hope for the good.
Many are trying to keep the spirit of giving alive through other means.
This year, we cannot organize a charity table, so we have increased food delivery at home because a lot of people have been impacted with this pandemic. Until now, we have delivered more than 2,000 bags of groceries. We will continue this throughout Ramadan.
While many countries have limited intercity travel, the most populous Muslim country, Indonesia, has banned travel altogether for Ramadan. Tens of millions of people wishing to leave big cities for their hometowns will have to spend the holidays away from family. In some Muslim countries, like Pakistan and Afghanistan, governments have bowed to pressure from clergy to keep mosques open, although with safety guidelines. Health officials worry the guidelines will be hard to implement. The day after Ramadan ends is one of the most festive Muslim holidays called Eid al-Fitr. Many Muslim countries have already banned collective Eid prayers and subsequent festivities. Aisha Tanzim, VOA News, Islamabad.
Libya has over 50 confirmed cases of COVID-19 as the country imposes curfews, closes borders, and restricts movement to keep the number of infections down. But these actions may have unintended consequences for migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, some who are trying to make their way to Europe across the Mediterranean Sea. VOA's Ayengdeng Biol has the details.
Migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees are still on the move, even as COVID-19 grips countries around the world. In Libya, fears of the spread of the virus are compounded by years of fighting and internal strife. Plus, tighter restrictions on movement are creating new challenges for vulnerable groups.
So we've seen that over the weekend, over the Easter weekend, where we had people trying to flee Libya. And we know that these days, taking a ship, a boat, a flimsy boat to leave Libya is the only possibility because the borders are closed, the airports are closed. There are no evacuation by the UN of the most vulnerable ones, the refugees.
Libya's conflict, now more than 5 years old, has devastated health infrastructures in the country.
And then on top of it, we're dealing with populations that already have difficulty accessing health services. So that's migrants, it's refugees. It can even be very much internally displaced persons. So Libyans in their own countries may have difficulty accessing health services.
In March, the United Nations Refugee Agency reported some 800 people attempted to cross the Mediterranean Sea after departing from Libya. In April, the Libyan Coast Guard said it had rescued 280 migrants and returned them to shore. But Libyan officials denied them entry as the country shut down its borders because of fears of COVID-19, according to the UN. Closing or restricting borders are measures taken by countries to prevent the spread of the virus. The action, in some cases, has dismantled freedom of movement, including imposing curfews, which is making it difficult for anyone to move about, including migrants, refugees, or asylum seekers.
So we have the conflict, we have a weak health system, we have COVID cases that have been declared. So this is not some sort of theoretical question. It is happening now. And we have people who are extremely vulnerable because of their living conditions. The migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, as mentioned earlier, but also people who have been displaced by the conflict in Libya.
Over 370,000 Libyans are internally displaced in a country that hosts more than 38,000 refugees. International aid groups say preventative measures like social distancing and hand washing in a refugee and internally displaced person camp is a challenge.
So the job now is we're really in a race against time to prevent the virus from getting into these places to begin with. So making sure people have things like running water and soap, which many of us take for granted, for example. A lot of the recommendations like physical distancing can be really challenging if you are living in a crowded refugee camp.
For now, Wells says, one of the most important things to do is spread awareness and credible information. Ayen Dengbyor, VOA News, Washington.
Money is running out at the publicly owned Uganda Wildlife Education Center after it closed to visitors. Administrators say it can only keep running for another 2 months. Edward Barron reports.
Naya Kato, an orphaned baby elephant at the Uganda Wildlife Education Centre. For now, her biggest problem is loneliness. Soon, it may be food. Cash at the centre where she lives, alongside hundreds of other animals, from lions to rhinos, is running out. Last year, they welcomed almost 400,000 people, but visitor numbers started dropping in January, and it was forced to close its doors at the end of March. Executive Director of the publicly owned centre is James Muzinguzi.
When we closed, the implication was that no coin was coming in, as we speak right now, because money was coming in through gate collections, accommodation, restaurant, specialized programs. Those are not happening anymore.
Bosses estimate the centre can only keep going another 2 months. Naya Kato alone drinks 12 litres of baby formula a day, which costs the equivalent of $1,900 per month. The lockdown in Uganda, initially for 14 days, was extended for an extra 3 weeks on April 14th. Even if lockdown ends soon, global travel and tourism are likely to take time to recover. For now, the centre is trying to attract supporters using virtual tours on social media, and bosses are hoping more cash will come soon to keep the animals from going hungry.
That was Edward Barron of Reuters reporting. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador and renowned African artist Angelique Kidjo revives an old song to spread information and hope in a time of coronavirus. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Africa 54. The World Food Programme is sounding the alarm on a possible hunger pandemic as conflict and the COVID-19 pandemic cut off people's access to food in war zones around the world. Of particular concern is the Central Sahel region of West Africa. In recent years, insurgencies and counter-insurgencies have displaced over 1 million people in the Central Sahel, causing a major hunger crisis. Africa 54's Jason Patinkin spoke to the World Food Programme's West Africa spokesman, George Fominien, about how COVID-19 is making a bad situation even worse.
In the lean season, that is the period when people have just gone to their farms and fields and planted and they are waiting for the harvest. That this period when they usually do not have enough supplies, we would probably have about 5.5 million people who would be approximately in need of, who will be facing severe food insecurity and would need food assistance.
With COVID-19, how is that impacting people's ability to access food? And also, how is that impacting the ability for the World Food Programme or other organizations and governments to bring food to the people who need it, to the people in refugee camps, to the people in IDP camps, those really most vulnerable people?
Exactly. And I would even start from that point. It's the point of the supply chains, because if the supply chains are not working, if as a result of the restrictions and movements, we are not able to move the necessary support for people, that's a real difficulty, not only for humanitarian organizations, but even for businesses, even for the governments and the communities. So let's take the example of the Sahelian countries. Most of these countries are landlocked. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they're landlocked, which means that if they need supplies, whether it's goods for the normal services in the country, or even when it's humanitarian supplies, they have to come in through the coastal countries and have to move in. Now, what we have been urging, and we have to say that there's a positive nod towards that. What we've been urging the government is that they should understand that these supply chains need to be maintained. We need to be able to have, both for the humanitarian purposes, but also for the commercial purposes, to supply the people, that there is access and there is movement so that you can get supplies, whatever they may be, to communities.
In Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, where there's a lot of conflict, what needs to be done in terms of the conflict to at least ease things right now? Is there any indication that some of these armed groups or governments or whoever it may be are reducing the amount of military operations to help or allow things to improve a bit during COVID-19?
The highest levels of food insecurities, the places where we had to do most of our work in the world, were in places where there was conflict. And so if you eliminate that, if you find a way to bring peace, if we find a way to dialogue, if we find a way to ensure that people live in conditions where their lives are not disrupted and their livelihoods are not disrupted, there's a possibility that you lower the chances of people in food insecurity. And therefore, that would be the message. That is a message of peace. Maybe this is something that comes to remind us that we need to find a way to live together.
Parts of Europe this week began easing some of the lockdown measures created to combat the coronavirus pandemic, with shops and schools reopening. The differing responses to the outbreak mean that some countries have successfully kept down infection and death rates and are able to reopen their economies, while others like Britain, Spain, and Italy are still recording hundreds of deaths a day. Henry Ridgewell reports.
In Rome, a tentative ray of light. After 2 long months of lockdown, some bookshops have been allowed to reopen.
I've actually come here to buy some stuff for the grandchildren. When I see them, we'll have a party.
The celebrations remain on hold. Rome marked 2,773 years since its founding on Wednesday, but the birthday party was postponed. Italy is still recording hundreds of deaths a day, and most of the economy is still shut down. The World Health Organization urged Europe to show caution.
Easing restrictions is not the end of epidemic in any country.
Elsewhere, elements of normal life are returning. Germany is allowing small shops to reopen. In Prague, outdoor markets are back in business. In Norway, nursery schools are welcoming pupils. Friends reunited.
Now, in countries that were very effective in flattening the curve, like Austria, Czech Republic, and Norway, there are very few ongoing new cases, tens to maybe about 100 per day. Certainly in those countries, measures to begin easing social distancing are appropriate. Other places like Germany that have had a high number of infections but a low number of deaths, but with really strong capacity, I think are also in positions to do this.
In Britain, the lockdown remains in place, with the country on course to be the worst hit in Europe.
We're maybe just barely past the peak. We're still at sort of a plateau. So it's really going to be several weeks before we see enough of a sustained decline in transmission caused by the current lockdown that it would really be safe, in my opinion, to begin opening up again.
Global work on a vaccine continues at an unprecedented pace, but it will be several months or longer before anything is available on a large scale. In the meantime, scientists say the easing of the lockdown in countries like Germany offers important lessons.
First, that you've had a sustained decrease in the number of new infections, at least 2 weeks going down. Second, that your health system can cope and that you're no longer relying on emergency measures like temporary hospitals. And then finally, and really important, to be able to move back to a containment strategy, you need to be able to have very widespread testing capacity in place so that you can test everybody with symptoms, and you need to have tracing capacities.
Testing and contact tracing. Finding and isolating those who have come into contact with an infected individual are methods employed successfully in countries like South Korea and Vietnam. Scientists say this is the key to opening up shuttered Western societies. Brick by brick, parts of Europe are nervously taking down the defensive wall. The coming weeks will reveal if this cautious step toward normality is justified, or if scenes like this will signal the start of a second wave of COVID-19 infections. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
For people around the world who are living under a stay-at-home mandate during the pandemic, the internet has created a sense of normalcy during extraordinary times. VOA's Elizabeth Lee shows us creative ways people are entertaining, sharing, and connecting online.
The internet has become an escape, a window into sanity for those stuck at home. With a few keystrokes, anyone anywhere in the world can see and hear free opera from New York. Or take a virtual 360 look, such as inside this museum. Or a tour of the New York Botanical Garden.
Look at the stars.
Through social media, you can experience an intimate performance from inside the homes of celebrities such as Chris Martin, the lead singer of the British rock band Coldplay. Some people have found a way to make the internet more interactive. With online video conferencing, Jason Smith has been able to play online board games with friends, hosts virtual watch parties of a favorite TV show,
2, 1, engage,
and even virtual dinners.
Sun-dried tomatoes.
That sounds lovely.
It's nice to be social and somehow seeing people's faces while you do this normal thing, even in a really not normal way. Just seeing faces kind of makes it feel a little more normal and a little easier to swallow, a little easier to digest.
8-year-old Emma Paik and her mom organized her online birthday party.
It was fun because they sang happy birthday. We did a scavenger hunt and we did a dance party.
At first, Emma's mom, Nan Paik, was crushed when she realized her daughter was not going to be able to spend her birthday with friends or go on a planned family trip.
To tell her that I couldn't do any of these things for her was really hard.
But then Emma attended a virtual birthday party for Smith's daughter.
My daughter, at the end of the day, actually said that it was her best birthday ever, which was really sweet.
I get chocolate frosting.
I can see why she said it after the day she had, because she was just surrounded by love all day long, and that's really special, especially in a time like this.
Inspired by her friend's party, Emma went to work on 2 parties.
She made an agenda, she had a guest list. You know, one party was school friends, and the other party was Girl Scout friends. She had a virtual after party. She made her friends watch her eat cake.
It's also fun because they don't have to eat my cake and don't make a mess around my house.
Whether you're 8 or 80, technology has made staying home during the pandemic bearable.
How they could easily bring her and her friends together, even though they're, apart physically.
Creating a new normal for entertainment and helping people stay connected during trying times.
Check in with some of you out there and see how you're doing. And
Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
In our entertainment segment, once called the world's most defiantly joyful song, Miriam Makeba's Pata Pata has been re-recorded by UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador Angelique Kidjo to spread information and hope in a time of coronavirus. The song has particular resonance for Kidjo, whose friend, Afro-jazz icon Manu Dibango, died earlier this month from coronavirus. Manu inspired me, Miriam inspired me, and Pata Pata gave me hope, said Kidjo. We all know what needs to be done, but we also know how much communities are suffering. Pata Pata has always been there for people at a time of struggle. I hope it helps once more, and I hope from our confined spaces we can dance once more. Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.